Hi, I'm Ted. I'm a knitting teacher in St. Paul, and I wanted to talk today about tubular cast-ons. I love tubular cast-ons. I think they're a great start for one-by-one ribbing. They really let the ribbing flow beautifully from one side to the next. It looks professional. It's relatively elastic, and just a great look altogether. The normal way that people normally usually do it is something called an Italian cast-on, which isn't that hard to do, but it's very unstable. It likes to twist around the needle. It's hard to get jointed around without a twist. I find it more frustrating than fun, and it's knitting, so we should be having fun. So I use either Judy's Magic Cast-On or Turkish Cast-On to start my tubular. There's other ways as well, but I found this to be pretty fast and um, pretty stable as well. Today I'm going to do Turkish for the cast on to start. We'll need two sets of needles. We need one set of needles for the ribbing. So I've got a bulky yarn. I'm going to use a size 8 for my ribbing, but my actual cast on I'm going to use a size 10. We want this to be more like our stockinette needle size. The first part of the tubular is actually a little piece of stockinette, and if we go straight with the ribbing needle, it'll make it too tight and not elastic enough. So I found that by going up to a couple needle sizes to whatever I would typically use for stockinette for that fabric typically works out. So they also need to be either a 32 or 40-inch long needle, depending on how many stitches you have. And we're going to end up sort of doing a magic loop part of this. You could also use two different needles of the same dimension and just have them be long. So if I needed a lot of stitches, I might have two size 10 needles, or if I only had 16 tens, I could use two of those as well. Um, but we need to have pretty decent length there, and we need to be able to go back on itself as well. So the first thing we're going to do is put a slip knot on our needle. This isn't going to count as a stitch. Get that up there. It's just there to secure the yarn. So it could be either on our top needle or our bottom needle. It doesn't really matter that much. One of the nice things about this method is we can cast on even a few extra stitches, or if we need to, we can make an extra stitch when we're done at the end. So there's a little bit of flexibility with that. We don't have to figure out how long a tail to put in or anything like that. So Turkish cast on itself is one of the easiest ones to do. All you're doing is wrapping the yarn around a pair of needles like this. It's always in a pair. You could wrap the other way as well, but if you do that, you might notice that your stitches would be mounted what we would call Eastern. So most people are used to having their stitches mounted Western, something more like this. But either way can possibly work. Each time you wrap the yarn around the needle, you're actually counting that as two stitches in this case. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So we'll start with that number. If we needed an odd number, we could have an extra half wrap just on the top, for instance, or at the end as well, um, or bring up that piece. One of the things that can happen is if we go a bunch and we found out that we had too many, we could just stop early and that would just become part of our tail. If we needed extra, we could just undo our slip knot and wrap it around one more time, and then we can get an extra stitch off of it that way. So we're going to start here and we'll do 12 stitches. So I've got them, six wraps, counting as 12 stitches. The next part is to pull my bottom needle long, and I'm going to go back and knit across that top needle. So this comes long, and I'm going to knit across here. So one, that feels like it's not really going to be a stitch, but it's fine. Two, oop, two, three, four, five, and six. So that's six. Now I'm going to have 6 more across the bottom. So here, I want to turn it 180 degrees. I don't want to rotate it this way. I'm going to flip it so this part still is looking at me and around that way. Now here's where the magic loop part comes in. That goes in. And I tension my yarn. This one comes out. This is my slip knot right here. That one's not counting. So that just gets kicked off. Boom. And again, if I needed to, I could actually add an extra stitch with it right here. And that could be my 13th stitch if I needed it to be. Yeah, I would go like that. But in this case, I'm just going to go across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And this one, it's a little bit of a toss up whether you go through the back. It's just a kind of a twist. I'll probably go through the front like normal. But that'll be an extra twist on that stitch. Nobody will ever be able to see that one way or the other. So we're done with actually our Turkish part of the cast on. We're going to now join these to make one piece of ribbing. So to do that, I'm going to bring in my smaller needle and I'm going to purl off the back needle and knit off the front needle. So I want my little piece of knitting to be knit out, purls up. You can see there's some purls there and some knits there. That's our little mini piece of stockinette. The next thing to check on is what is our first stitch. It's this back one right here, so that's going to be a purl. You can kind of see it if you look here. We don't want to knit this first and then purl and knit purl. This is our first stitch, and that's going to be our back needle because of the way it's lined up. So that's going to be a purl. So we're going to purl and knit and purl and knit. I like to have this set up so I'm doing this joining on the opposite end as the tail. So rather than trying to have the tail in the way and going this way, I want to do it here. So if I wanted a bigger tube for my tubular, I could go across these both one more time, and then I would have a bigger, rounder tube. This always feels like enough to me. So I'm going to purl this first one, purl, and that comes off. This is where we have to start to be careful about not having other stitches fall off. So, and now I'm going to go to this front needle and I'm going to knit. And the back needle and purl. And the front needle and knit. And back and purl. Front and knit. Sorry, my yarn is going to split there. Knit. And I have to kind of keep an eye on those stitches. That one was a line fall off. Purl. Knit. Purl. Knit. One last purl. That yarn is kind of split. Let's get it back up there. There. Purl. And last knit. Oh, tail's getting caught in there. Knit. Okay. So that's our setup, or our cast on, I should say. We've got our tube started right there. And now I can just go ahead and work my 1x1 ribbing. get you untangled. So I would just start purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. If for some reason your pattern has you start as a knit as your first stitch, just make that your last stitch and move your beginning of the round marker over one. It's not a big deal. So okay. So I'm going to do this all over from the very beginning one more time. I'm going to have my yarn being as if I'm throwing instead of picking, being a English style knitter instead of a continental style knitter. And it's all basically the same, but it'll be one more run through. So let's get this off, undo, 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 like it never happened. And we'll start all over. So back to my bigger needles, back to a new slip knot. This goes on. And this tail can be, it doesn't need any drastic amount, 4 or 6 inches, something like that. I am just in the habit of having my knot at the bottom. But let's try it at the top instead. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I did that with my tail, which was not correct. So let's try it all over again with the actual yarn. 1, 2, 3, oops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So by putting my knot on the top, I actually have an extra half of a stitch right there. I shouldn't say half, but this could make me have 11, which might be the right answer. So for knitting flat, you probably have an odd number of stitches if you're doing one by one knitting. If you're knitting around, you would have an even number of stitches. So that is a little thing to keep an eye on. So I'm going to go across. Oops, I'm supposed to be doing English style. So throw that. And again, that first stitch feels a little weird. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now I'm going to actually just put this back on my needle, that slip knot, even though I'm not going to keep it there, but it helps me with this one because now you can see I've got 6 on top. So top needle goes in, a little tight at the other end, but that'll sort itself out. Tension my yarn here, pull this bottom one out, and then we'll knit these 6. And again, we want to make sure we're looking at the knitting side, not the purl side. So then I'm going to knit out of my way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this is that one at the end that's kind of oddly twisted. 6. And that's that. So now this time, because I had an odd number of stitches, I will start and end with a purl before I started with a purl and ended with a knit. So everything back in, and I can see, here's my 5, and there's my 6, and there's my slip knot that's sitting there but not counting as anything. So switch to my other needle, and then I'm going to purl the back In some ways, I think this is actually a little easier as far as not having things fall off because I'm not kind of pointing towards the tips in the same way. And my yarn's not in the way. Oop, didn't move my yarn to the front. You can tell that this isn't how I normally knit because I make little mistakes like that. Purl, and then knit. And purl, and back knit. And knit. And I got my last stitch here. That is the purl. And then my slip knot comes off and I'm ready to go. So again, I'm all joined up with a nice little tubular right there. And if I wanted a more relaxed, rounder tube, I would have gone, instead of back and forth on my needles, I would have gone around 4 times. So Judy's Magic Cast On is a cousin to Turkish Cast On. They both kind of use the same 2 needles. If you know Judy's, what you can do is do Judy's and then knit across just 1 needle tip and then do your joining. So I would take these 2 needles, I would do Judy's, and then I would knit across 1 tip. My tail would be at the opposite end. My tail would be now at this side, and I would join just like I did here. So they're 6 and 1/2 dozen to the other. Turkish is faster. Judy's, you've got 1 less row. Judy's, if you don't know it, it's just a little bit trickier to learn, but it's a useful thing to have in your tips. And I think I've got a video on that as well. So hopefully that is helpful for folks and that you are excited about doing tubular in a way that won't be quite so twisty and unstable as you would find with Italian. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.